Welcome back, my friends. Tonight, we travel east, beyond the great rivers and golden deserts, to a world where kings were gods, and their whispers could raise cities or erase lives. We're stepping into ancient Persia, a land of monumental palaces, immortal stone carvings, and the kind of silence that falls right before your name is struck from the record. So before you get too cozy, go ahead and grab that blanket, dim the lights, and, if you haven't yet, subscribe so you don't miss the next midnight history escape. Now, imagine this. Sunlight pours through towering cedar columns as you kneel before the King of Kings. The court is still. You've waited months for this moment. Your tribute is flawless, your speech perfect. But the royal vizier beside the throne doesn't blink. He leans forward, says your name again, slower this time. A scribe hesitates, just one word out of place, one blood tie misremembered, and the tone in the room shifts. You can feel it in your bones. The scent of incense fades beneath the weight of something heavier, judgment. Because you see, this sun-drenched royal court may look like a place of peace and power, but it's not what you think. Here, favor is a mask, and smiles are dangerous. One step out of line, and you're not scolded. You disappear, silently, without legacy, without memory. In ancient Persia, greatness was no shield. Even heroes were undone by suspicion, politics, or the wrong god at the wrong moment. What would your fate have been? Would you have risen through the ranks, or vanished behind the palace gates, forgotten forever? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight and what time it is for you. I'd love to know who's still awake with me on this quiet night. Now, let's begin. You may think surviving in ancient Persia was about being clever, loyal, or strong. Maybe you believe that if you followed the rules, paid your taxes, or bowed low enough before the king, you'd be safe. But here's the truth, and it isn't pretty. It didn't matter. In the heart of one of history's most powerful empires, survival was a coin toss, weighted by birth, fate, and the mood of someone far above you. Because if you were born in the wrong province, spoke the wrong dialect, or worshipped your god a little differently, everything could shift against you. You might wake up one morning a respected elder, and by nightfall, find your house burned, your name erased from records, and your family sold into silence. There were no appeals. If the satrap, your regional governor, said you owed the king more grain than your village could grow, you either delivered the impossible or watched soldiers carry off your children. And if you lived near the border, you were a shield, a buffer zone, a tool to slow down the next invading army. When the Greeks marched, or nomads raided, no one came to defend you. You were never meant to be defended. You were meant to die slowly enough to buy time for the capital to prepare. That was your purpose. In ancient Persia, glory was reserved for monuments, for men carved into stone, standing still and silent above a graveyard of forgotten lives. And beneath that brilliance, below the golden capitals and the immortals in shining armor, was a dark truth. You were expendable, unless you were royalty, or sacred, or incredibly lucky. The system didn't protect you. It used you. So tonight, ask yourself, not whether you could have thrived in Persia, but whether you could have survived. Because history remembers the kings, but it was built on the backs of everyone else, and most of them never stood a chance. You are called trusted. The word echoes down the marbled halls, embroidered in silk, carved into stone, and murmured in the quiet corners of the royal court. For 3 years, you've walked those polished floors of Persepolis, shoulder-brushing silk-robed nobles, voice calm in council, face always turned toward the King of Kings. You know the rituals, the 1,000 steps between the garden and the throne, the rules of pause, breath, and bow. You know to speak only when spoken to never, ever name the king without title, and above all, to smile, not too warmly, but just enough to imply loyalty. That feels effortless. This morning feels like every other. The hall glows amber in the dawn. You are summoned to advise the vizier on a minor dispute between satraps, something about water rights in Bactria. You think little of it. This is the routine that has shaped your days. You rise, cleanse your hands with rose water, tie your sash precisely, and step into the colonnade with your head high, calm, confident, familiar. But today, something is off. The guards at the gate avoid your eyes. The servant carrying your scrolls is replaced by someone new. When you enter the chamber, the vizier does not rise. He only watches you stone-faced, his fingertips pressed together. There is a silence, longer than usual. Then he speaks, not in accusation, not with rage, but with ice. You are being investigated, he says quietly. A report was made. Your name appeared beside the wrong man's. You blink, try to speak, but already the wheels are turning, and you know what this means. You will not be arrested in public. No, this is Persia. It will begin slowly. Your home will be watched. Your letters intercepted. Your servants questioned. One day soon, the royal scribes will arrive. Your name, once praised in bronze, will be scratched out of court records. Your image, struck from murals. Your land, seized. And you will simply vanish. That night, you do not sleep. You lie on your stone bed, listening to the slow drip of water from the fountain. Your wife says nothing, but you can feel the worry clinging to her breath. Your son dreams down the hall. You will not wake him. Tomorrow, he may no longer be the son of a courtier. You think of how quickly power shifts. You once watched a nobleman disappear this way. His estate reassigned, his servants retrained, his name never spoken again. You pitied him, quietly, safely. Now, the silence has turned inward. In the morning, you rise, bathe, dress, return to court as though nothing has changed. Because in ancient Persia, fear wears silk, betrayal smells like jasmine, and a fall from favor doesn't always come with chains. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a door that no longer opens. So you bow and smile and wait. The wind is dry and bitter today. You taste dust in your teeth before the sun even rises. That's how it always is here, on the edge of the empire. You are no noble, no warrior, no priest, just a peasant, a farmer born into the lowlands east of Susa, in a half-forgotten Median village tucked between the Zagros Mountains and the rivers that flood when they please and disappear when they don't. Your hands are cracked from labor, your back aches from years of plowing fields that never seem to yield enough. But you keep going, because if you stop, someone else eats your ration of barley, and your name fades with your bones. The Achaemenid Empire, you're told, is mighty, divine even. Its messengers can ride from Lydia to Gandhara in a matter of days. Its satraps speak with the king's voice. Its stone roads shimmer beneath the hooves of immortal cavalry. But none of that matters here. The King of Kings is hundreds of farsangs away. The only voice you hear is the tax collector's, and his voice carries a whip. Last spring, your son fell ill after the rains failed. You fed him what little goat's milk you had, crushed figs into gruel to make it stretch. But it wasn't enough. The tax still came due. A scribe arrived on horseback, along with 2 guards in iron-studded leather. He unrolled a wax tablet and began reading names. The list was short. The grain you owed was exact. You tried to explain, gently, respectfully, that the floodwaters had ruined the eastern plots, that 3 men in your village had died of snakebite, that your animals were thinning from disease. The scribe didn't blink. That is a local issue, he said. The king's needs do not change. So you gave what you had. Your reserve, jar, your wife's stored salt, your daughter's wedding bracelet. When that wasn't enough, you offered your ox. The guards took it, and still, they said it was not enough. That night, your oldest son was conscripted. Just like that, like that. They told him he would serve on the royal road, helping maintain the postal stations, that he would be clothed, fed, and paid. But you know better. You've seen the boys who return, limping, ragged, their hands calloused, not from farming, but from dragging stones for fortresses in lands whose names they never learned. Some never return at all. The empire may be vast, but out here, it's only real when it hurts you. And still, you endure. You rise before dawn, walk the field alone, whisper old Median prayers your grandmother taught you, even though the priest from the capital tells you Zoroaster forbade them. You don't care. The old gods of soil and rain feel closer than the fire temples of Persepolis. Your wife asks if you think your son is alive. You say yes, but deep down, you're not sure. Your younger children keep their eyes down now. They've learned what silence means, what it protects. One day, you hear a rumor. Alexander of Macedon has crossed the Hellespont, that he's marching east, fast and brutal. Some say the King of Kings is mustering an army larger than the stars. Others say the satraps are already retreating. You don't cheer. You don't care. Empires may rise and fall, but the dirt stays, and you're still the one tied to it. So you plant again, pray again, wait again, because this is life on the frontier. You're not a citizen, not a soldier, not even history. You are the backdrop, the forgotten, the ones who bury the bodies and are buried without names. And still, you endure. It begins with the soil. You learned that early, maybe from your father, or perhaps from no one at all, just from watching, the way the dust moves differently when it's dead, the way the barley bends too low when it's sick. The land doesn't lie to you. It never pretends to be a god, or a king, or a hero. it just withholds what you need and waits for you to break. You are a peasant on the eastern edge of the Achaemenid Empire, born not in a capital or a city, but in the cracked valley between the Zagros slopes and the burning flatlands. You speak a dialect older than the empire itself. When the tax collectors come, they don't understand your prayers, only your weights and your grain. And grain, that is where everything begins and where everything is lost. 3 seasons ago, the storms were late. The mountain snowmelt never came. The irrigation ditches dried to dust. You begged the village elders for help, but they could offer only superstition and silence. So you tried anyway, planted deep, mulched heavy, prayed longer, but the harvest was short, brittle, and bitter. Not enough to feed your children, let alone fill the king's jar. Still, the collectors came. They brought with them the seal of the satrap, wax stamped, gold trimmed. They spoke with voices too smooth to be trusted. They said the empire had expenses. There were roads to maintain, soldiers to pay, temples to rebuild. After the Babylonian rebellion, the king is the son of all lands, one of them said with a smile. Would you wish to deny him your shade? You gave them everything. You ground your last dried figs into paste, scraped honey from the hive's edge. You even cut your wife's mourning shawl, woven by her mother, to trade for dried lentils. And still, they said it was not enough. So they took your youngest daughter. No record, no explanation, just a nod from a guard and a hand that closed around her wrist. They said she would serve in the household of a noble in Ecbatana. A fine home, they said. She will eat better than you do. You believed them, because not believing would have killed you. After that, something in you shifted, not like a collapse, but a quiet folding inward. You stopped singing the old planting songs. You no longer walked barefoot on the spring grass. You just worked, because work is the only thing that doesn't betray you, and you're not alone in this. All across the empire's edge, past the shining cities carved in stone, there are thousands like you, men and women born into dust, raised by it, and laid back down into it. You hear their voices in the marketplace when you trade what little you have. Whispers in Median, Elamite, Old Persian, Gutian, Aramaic, different tongues, same pain. Some speak of rebellion, of slipping away into the mountains, joining the bandits who prey on caravans. You don't join them. You've seen what happens to rebels, crucified by the roadside, left for the vultures as a lesson. And besides, you have other mouths to feed. Their lives are in your hands, and your hands can only carry so much. Years pass like this. The seasons blur. Every time you hear hoofbeats, you freeze. Is it the collector, the recruiter, or some foreigner whose arrival means your village will soon be trampled under another army's march? And all the while, the empire continues. The king builds new palaces in Persepolis. Couriers ride the royal road, bringing messages sealed with the lion-headed stamps. The gold flows west, the blood flows east, and you remain. The frontier does not ask for your permission, it just uses you. And when you are old, when your knees can no longer push the plow, and your hands tremble too much to grind grain, you will sit outside your crumbling home under the last fig tree that still bears fruit, and wonder what it was all for. Your children will have grown, some conscripted, some lost, some broken by the same weight that bent you, but one or two may still remain. You will hold their hands and whisper to them the old stories, the ones before the empire, before kings, before gold and war and walls. You will tell them about gods who loved the land, about spirits that lived in the rivers and trees. And even though your voice is thin and your breath short for one small moment, it will feel like truth again. That is your rebellion. That is your memory. Because while the empire forgets, the earth remembers, and the dirt under your fingernails is older than all of it. You were not always a slave. Once, not long ago, you were a free Greek, a stonemason's son from a small Ionian port. The sea was your rhythm then, salted winds, early light on white walls, the scrape of bronze on limestone. You knew the price of olives, the weight of a chisel, the laughter of your brother as he kicked pebbles at stray dogs. That was before the Persians came in force, before rebellion called your name like thunder. The Ionian revolt promised glory. It whispered of free cities and broken chains, of standing shoulder to shoulder against the empire whose shadow fell from Egypt to India. So you joined, not because you hated the Persians, but because you were tired of bowing, tired of tribute, tired of waiting for the empire's next demand to rob your village of its sons. You held a spear, you learned to march, you learned to shout, and when the rebellion failed, as it always would, you learned to bleed. They didn't kill you when they caught you. That would have been mercy. Instead, they marched you east past the Halys River, across the dry plateaus of Armenia, until the land turned green again. You were chained with 20 others, mostly boys like you, loud once, silent now. One of them died in the Zagros Mountains, coughing blood in the snow. The guards didn't stop. Another tried to escape. They found him a day later, eyes pecked out, hands gone. You arrived in Susa, under a dying moon. The city didn't look real at first. Its palace walls glittered like stars on earth, cedar beams 3 men thick, blue tiles from Babylon, courtyards perfumed with rosewater. You wondered if you'd entered a god's dream, but dreams are not made of chains and whips. They didn't ask your name. They gave you a collar and a number. You were sent to the palace kitchens. Each morning, before the sky brightened, you hauled clay amphorae from the well to the fires. Each night, your arms shook from carrying waste to the outer pits. You were not alone. Dozens of others, from Egypt, Syria, Lydia, and even the eastern mountains, labored beside you. No one spoke much. The guards didn't like voices, and besides, too many had lost the will to remember their own language. Susa was quiet at night, too quiet. Sometimes, when the wind shifted, you could hear music from the upper courtyards, flutes and lutes, soft laughter, the voices of nobility. You never saw them, but you imagined them stepping on silk rugs, wearing gold from Bactria, sipping wine pressed by men like you. You once caught a glimpse of a satrap's daughter, her face veiled, her anklets jingling like tiny bells. She didn't look at you. You wouldn't have dared to look back if she had. You learned the rhythms of survival, Never be first. Never be last. Keep your head low when the whip cracks, and never weep where others can see. You saw a Thracian boy cry once, curled behind the water cistern. By morning, he was gone. Time lost meaning. The palace had no seasons, only shadows that shifted across polished stone. Years may have passed. You stopped counting, but you remembered your brother's name, and your mother's bread, and your father's hands, scarred and strong. Then, one day, you were summoned. A royal architect had died. The king's garden needed new stonework. They asked if any slave knew how to shape marble. You stepped forward, not quickly, not proudly, just enough. You were led to a different part of the city, clean, wide, guarded by men whose armor shone. You worked silently for days, chisel in hand, sweat on your back. The overseer said nothing until he saw your cuts, your lines. He grunted, didn't smile, but he didn't strike you either. They moved you again, closer to the craftsman. You weren't free, but your collar was loosened. You were fed better, no beatings. Some nights, you were allowed to sleep indoors, near the tools. You carved columns that would hold up the halls where nobles danced. You carved lions that would watch over fountains you'd never drink from. One evening, the overseer handed you a chipped tablet. Write your name, he said. Your hand shook. You hadn't held a stylus in years, but slowly, painfully, you scratched it out. Cleisthenes. It didn't matter to him, but it mattered to you. You still woke with nightmares of the march, of the hunger, of your brother's face when you left. You still wondered what happened to your village, whether your mother ever knew you were alive. You never stopped hating the empire, but hatred turned to something quieter. Not peace, not forgiveness, just distance. Eventually, you stopped being counted among the kitchen slaves. You earned coin, not much, but enough to trade for wool, or dates, or a clay cup of wine. You didn't spend it. You saved. Always. Until one winter morning, you walked out. Not escaped, just walked through the lower gate, where the guards didn't look too closely at craftsmen. You didn't run. You didn't hide. You just walked into the hills. The road back west is long. You don't know who still lives, or what cities still stand, but the sun on your face feels real again, and the weight on your neck is gone. You were not always a slave, and now, once more, you are not. The day begins like any other. Gray light, dust on your skin, and the weight of a bow across your back. You are a Persian archer, one of thousands in the army of King Darius III. You've marched for weeks through dry scrubland and scorched plains, chasing rumors of a Macedonian force crossing the Tigris. Now, on the eve of battle, you stand on a field near a town the Greeks call Gaugamela. It is not the first battlefield you've seen, but something in the wind feels final. You're not noble, not one of the immortals with their fine beards and polished armor. You are from the north, Media, or maybe the high Zagros, a hunter's son, better with a bow than a blade. That's why you were chosen for this. They say your eyes are sharp, that you can split a pigeon's neck from 100 paces. They've never asked if you want to. They don't need to. You string your bow with hands that no longer tremble. Around you, the army buzzes. Drums, horns, hooves. Darius has brought everything. Scythed chariots, cavalry in shining mail, elephants from the east that snort and stamp with unease. The king's tent looms on a hill behind you, flanked by banners that flap like dying birds. Priests walk among the ranks with fire and incense, muttering blessings. Your unit commander paces. He doesn't smile. None of you do. You've heard the stories, how Alexander cut through Granicus, how he shattered Tyre, how he's never lost. But this time is different. This time Darius has planned the field, dug trenches, cleared space for chariots to run, set traps where the enemy will charge. They say numbers are on your side. They say the gods favor the rightful king. But your hands still sweat. The morning mist breaks with a cry. Not a man's voice, but something higher, like the scream of a hawk. You look up, just in time to see the first Macedonian cavalry riding in columns, dust billowing at their heels. Shields gleam, spears glint, their phalanx moves like a single beast, disciplined, silent. The command is shouted, Nisha, draw, you, raise your bow. Not too high, let gravity help. You've done this before. You know the feel of gut strings stretched tight, the way your breath should hold just a moment longer than your shot. Arrows fly, 1,000 at once, a black wave. You don't look to see who falls. You knock another, fire again and again until your fingers bleed, until the sky rains wood and iron, but they don't break. Alexander's men push forward, step by terrible step, shields locked, eyes forward. You aim for the eye slits, the joints, the exposed skin beneath their arms. Still they come. The front line of chariots charges from your left. You glimpse the spinning blades at the axle, the painted horses frothing with foam. But the Greeks open their lines, let the chariots pass, and then close again, swallowing them whole. You see a horse bolt through your line, dragging a charioteer's broken body behind. A boy near you drops his bow and runs. Your commander screams his name, but it's already too late. The boy disappears beneath hooves. Now the flanks are collapsing. The Greek cavalry punches through on the right. Their lancers ride like thunder. You shoot one from his saddle, but another takes his place. You see Darius's standard wavering in the distance, the golden eagle swaying. Then, suddenly, it moves. South, away, retreat. The king is fleeing, and in that instant, everything unravels. Your line buckles. Men scream. Some drop their weapons. Some raise their hands. Others simply stand still, as if unsure whether they are dead already. You drop your last arrow. The bow slips from your hand. Not fear, not shame, just silence. The kind that only comes when everything loud has been broken. You do not run. Not at first. You stand in the dirt of Gaugamela and watch the dream of empire die, not with fire, not with some great explosion, but like this, like sand pouring out of a cracked jar. Then, finally, your legs move. You walk. No direction, no order, just away. From the field, from the blood, from the golden eagle, that no longer means anything. You were a soldier of Persia, and today you have seen it fall. There will be other kings, other banners, but something in you was buried here. beneath the arrows and the dust, and long after your bones are forgotten, the wind at Gaugamela will still carry the silence of that final breath. You were born into fire, not just the fire that warms or burns, but the sacred flame that never dies. It lives at the heart of the temple, enclosed in stone, watched day and night by hands like yours. You are an acolyte of the old faith, Zoroastrianism, trained in purity, discipline, and silence. Your temple stands near the high plains of Persis, built into a rocky hill, with a view that stretches farther than the eye. When you were young, you believed the flame could see as far as you could, maybe farther. You whispered to it, sang to it when no one listened. And as you grew older, you learned the rites, how to crush the hauma leaves, how to recite the gathas without a stutter, how to feed the flame with the cleanest wood, and never your breath. You believed, truly believed, that fire was the mouth of Ahura Mazda, that every spark was a voice, that every moment the flame stood was proof that truth had not yet fallen to the lie. But truth, as you're learning now, has enemies, and the lie wears crowns. It begins subtly, not with burning temples, but with new scrolls, new laws, edicts spoken in polished Greek, written by men who never stepped into your sanctum. The new rulers, followers of foreign gods, have no quarrel with you, they say, but still, the funding stops. Still, your elder high priest is summoned to court and does not return. You are told to reduce your rituals, to burn less wood, to silence the chants during twilight hours. It is only temporary, they say, for unity. But the silence feels permanent. The boys you train alongside begin to vanish. One is sent to serve a Seleucid official in Ecbatana. Another joins a caravan and never returns. You are not yet old, but the temple feels older without them. Its stones echo louder now. Its flame feels smaller, though you feed it the same. Then one morning, a patrol of soldiers appears. They do not enter. They stand at the gate, backs straight, eyes flat. Their leader, a man in leather with a foreign accent, hands you a decree. Your temple is no longer sanctioned. The state fire will now burn in the newly constructed Hellenic sanctuary down the valley, a temple built for many gods, gods with faces, wings, muscles, thunderbolts. Your fire has no face, only heat, only light. You beg, you kneel, you cite your lineage, your rights, your records. You speak of Zarathustra, of Asha, of order, and the cosmic struggle. The officer only says, "I do not speak your tongue." Then he nods once. By nightfall, the temple is empty, but not abandoned, not abandoned. You remain, alone. You keep the flame, not because you were told to, but because it is the only thing you still believe in. You use driftwood now, smuggle it from the riverbeds, sometimes only twigs, but still, it burns. The villagers bring you bread, quietly. A few remember. Their grandfathers were fire watchers too. They do not stay long, but they leave offerings in clay bowls. Salt, dried herbs, a coin pressed with the old king's face. Seasons pass. You no longer wear white robes. The cloth is too worn, too thin. You wear what you have, but you wash it daily. You recite the Avesta to yourself, loud enough for the flame to hear. One day, a boy comes. He is no older than you were when you first lit a ritual fire. His hair is tangled, his eyes uncertain. He asks what the flame means. You show him, not with words, but with silence, with the way you kneel, with the way your hand never flinches when you feed the wood. He returns the next day, and the next. Soon he learns the hymns. His voice cracks when he chants, but he chants anyway. You are not alone anymore, but the world is changing again. There is talk of war in the west, of a new king rising from Parthia. The Seleucid governor in the region grows paranoid. One evening, soldiers return. This time, they do enter. They knock over the incense bowls, smash the altar. One draws his sword and swings it through the flame. It flickers, but it does not die. You stand between it and them, not as a warrior, as a wall. They leave, laughing, but the boy does not laugh. He helps you clean. He helps you repair. He helps you believe again. Years pass. The boy becomes a man. He builds a smaller altar beside yours. He carves the words of the Avesta into the stone walls. You teach him all you know, and when your hands begin to shake, he lights the flame before you can. You grow old. One night, you sit beside the fire, your body failing, your voice too thin to chant. The boy, now grown, kneels and sings alone. You listen. You smile. You close your eyes. The flame remains, but the story does not end with you. That boy, your student, your shadow, buries you beneath the southern wall of the temple, just as tradition dictates. He keeps the fire burning. He teaches others. Slowly, word spreads. Quietly, pilgrims return. The Seleucids grow weak. Their soldiers turn against them, and from the northeast, the Parthians rise. With them comes change, a cautious tolerance. The temples once condemned are now left alone. Some even rebuilt. Statues of Ahura Mazda reappear, carved into rock faces, standing watch over forgotten valleys. The man you trained becomes a high priest. He leads ceremonies. At dawn, sings the yasna, teaches the children to respect fire as living truth. And though he speaks your name only in prayer, he keeps your memory in every flicker of flame. Decades pass. The world shifts again. The Romans come. Then the Sassanids. Each new power brings its own threats, its own promises. But still, the flame burns. It burns through empires. It burns through names. It burns through time. Until, in a world changed beyond recognition, one small temple in the hills of Persis continues to glow. And there, beneath layers of soot and silence, lies the story of a forgotten acolyte who refused to let the light die. You were not raised to beg. You sit in silence, your wrists bound in coarse leather, ankles rubbed raw from the rope looped around them. The room is dim, carved from mountain, stone, its floor covered with rough woolen rugs that smell of ash and animal. Smoke rises from a central hearth, curling toward the rafters like a silent serpent. You stare at it instead of the men around you. The warlord's sons speak in Parthian, but you know enough to understand. You're a trophy, a hostage of worth, too valuable to break. too dangerous to let go. Someone laughs, someone spits. You do not flinch. You do not ask for water or food or mercy. You are Arshaya of the House Meran, daughter of Lord Bahram, warden of the southern satrapy. Or you were. That name is no longer spoken aloud. Here, you are only that woman from the Green Palace, the one whose hand bore a ring with the twin lion crest of ancient kings. Your captors call you noble, but their eyes say, enemy. The day they came began with music. The sun had just crested the horizon. From your veranda, you watched it climb like a gold drawn across silk. Below, the orchards still held the last of spring's blossom. Doves nested in the temple colonnades. Your cousins practiced archery in the courtyard, while the kitchen smoke curled sweetly from the inner court. You had not yet braided your hair when the horns sounded. At first, you thought it was a ceremony. Perhaps a rider returned. Perhaps your brother had brought news from the border. Then the bells rang from the temple tower, low, uneven, urgent, and your mother said your name with fear in her voice. You remember the chaos as clearly as you remember the scent of rose oil from your skin that morning. Servants fleeing, guards dragging chests toward the stable, your uncle shouting orders with a drawn blade, his voice already hoarse with disbelief. They came not from the west, as expected, but from the hills behind. Somehow, a rival clan had slipped through the mountain paths. They did not come to negotiate. They came to erase. Your father's forces tried to hold the outer walls. You watched from the high balcony as the fighting reached the gardens. The air filled with arrows and torch smoke. You heard the screams echo between the marble columns. You did not cry. You gripped the carved frame of your doorway until your hands bled, and when they came for you, when you were pulled from the servants' tunnel, your veil torn, your anklet snapped, you said nothing. You had been taught long ago how a noblewoman falls, without sound, days blurred, carried across hills, blindfolded, then set down in a stronghold that smelled of goatskin, fire, and earth. Their fortress was nothing like your home. No mosaics, no painted ceilings, no marble courtyards, just shadowed rooms and cold clay. At first, they left you alone. Food was brought, but you touched nothing. When the women tried to undress you, you bared your teeth like a cornered lioness. One laughed and muttered something about your spirit. Another muttered that it would not last. But it did. Even now, weeks, perhaps months later, you do not eat in front of them. You wait until they leave the plate. You wash your own skin with snow melt, pour it over your feet with a bowl, never asking for help. You do not speak unless spoken to. You return their stares with silence. Your father taught you diplomacy, but your mother taught you survival. She once told you, the world respects silence more than beauty. Let them imagine what you are thinking. It is more powerful than letting them know. So, you say nothing, and they begin to fear your quiet. You were always the political one. While your brothers sparred in the training yard, you listened in this marble audience chamber, watched the emissaries from the central court bow before your father. You learned which satrapies were loyal, which merely obedient. You memorized the bloodlines of the rival clans, not from curiosity, but from caution. That is how you recognized the warlord's seal on the blade that killed your guard. And that is how you know this kidnapping is not just personal, it is strategic. They mean to use you, to force your family's hand, or the courts, to draw out loyalty, land, or blood. You were taught to play these games with veils and riddles. But this is a game of knives. And still, you play it. She visits you sometimes. Older, stern-faced, draped in heavy linen with red-stitched trim. She brings you broth in a bronze bowl and watches you as you sip it. You know she is measuring you, not for weakness, but for pride. She is the mother of the young man who guards your door, and the aunt of the one who speaks Persian when he thinks no one hears. She asks you questions sometimes. Do you miss your home? You answer with a small nod. She asks, do you hate us? You do not reply. One day, she tells you, I lost my daughter to your father's soldiers. She was 12. You look her in the eyes, and for a moment, the silence between you is not empty. It is full. Grief recognizes grief, not as an apology, but as truth. She begins bringing honey with your bread. You do not thank her, but you eat. The mountains do not favor the uninvited. You waited until the moon was high, until the hearths had burned low, and the guards' laughter faded into muttered half-dreams. You had memorized their rotations by then. 6 weeks of study wrapped in silence. You listened to the rhythm of boots, counted every door hinge creak, each yawning breath from the eastern watch. You stole the flint knife from the bread tray days earlier, used it to work through the rope that held your ankles at night. A few fibers each day, never enough to attract notice, just enough to plant hope in your chest. When the hour came, you moved like mist through the hallway, past the dog that was too old to bark, out the back stairwell where the stones were cracked and the mortar crumbling. For a moment, you stood beneath the night sky, stars like crushed silver above the black ridge. You breathed freedom, cold and raw, and then a hand gripped your arm like a vice. They had waited for you. Perhaps they always had. The warlord's youngest son dragged you back by the hair. You did not scream, even as your knees scraped against stone, even as they threw you before the hearth and demanded to know who helped you. You said nothing. They struck you once. You did not cry. They left you there, in the center of the room, bound again, firelight dancing across your bruised cheek. No one approached you. No one spoke to you for 3 days. Even the warlord's wife stayed away. But you did not break, not because you are invulnerable, but because something deeper had taken root inside you now. Not pride, not revenge, but clarity. You had been a noble woman of House Moran. Now you are something harder. The messenger arrived just before the snow. He came veiled in dust, with scrolls bound in red cord, and the seal of the king's steward burned into the wax. He spoke only to the clan leader behind closed doors, but you heard enough in the rustling aftermath to understand. Your worth had increased, not because of pity, but because war now whispered in the capital's corridors. The central court feared a rebellion among the mountain tribes, the same tribes who held you, and a noblewoman of your stature. She could be the spark or the bomb. So an offer was made. Silver, land, a writ of pardon. Your return, they said, would be framed as a gesture of peace. The warlord's wife brought the news to you herself. She studied your face carefully, trying to read you. You nodded once. You said, "I will return in silence." And she understood what you meant. You would not arrive with an army. You would not return to curse her people. But you would not forget. You rode down the mountain with your spine straight and your hands unchained. The guards were ceremonial now. The warlord's wife placed a veil over your shoulders, not as a kindness, but as a curtain, a final act of control. They wanted you to return without telling the world what happened, and you obliged. For now, your father's house no longer stood. It had been stripped and burned. Your brothers scattered, one killed, one in hiding, one said to serve now in the Sassanid military. Your mother had survived. She lived in a smaller home now, surrounded by a few old servants who had bent but never broken. She wept when she saw you, but you held her shoulders gently and whispered, "We do not weep for survival." You washed the mountain dust from your skin with rose water. You braided your hair yourself. You put the twin lion ring back on your finger. 8. The fire in her eyes. Years passed. You married, eventually, not for love, but for alliance. A minor lord, politically neutral, kind to your mother. He knew your story. He never asked questions. He never asked you to kneel. You bore him a daughter, and when she was old enough, you taught her not just poetry and dance, but silence, the powerful kind, the kind that watches, the kind that waits. You trained her in lineage, in laws, in maps, in what can be said without speaking. When men gathered around your husband's court, they listened to you, even when they pretended not to. And slowly, the world shifted, not with war, but with memory. You built shrines, small at first, then schools. You funded poets who wrote of noble women, not as wives, but as keepers of the line. You taught girls to memorize bloodlines, the way boys memorized sword strokes. And all the while, you never spoke of the mountain keep, but you carried it in your eyes. And the people noticed. You are old now. Your daughter is grown. Her children study the Avesta in temples where your name is engraved in stone, not as hostage, not as widow, but as rebuilder of House Moran. The warlord's family is long gone. Their fortress fell to snow, then stone, then silence. No one remembers their sons. But your name? It lingers in the pages of court records, in the bronze statues beside temple doors. One day, a boy, no older than your grandson, asks if the stories are true, that you once faced death in the mountains and returned without a sword. You smile and say, "I returned with silence and built louder things." That night, you sit by the window. The wind rustles the curtains. You close your eyes. You remember the mountain fire, the cracked stone floors, the laughter of men who no longer breathe. And still, you do not tremble, because you were not raised to beg. You were raised to outlast, and you have. You were no one special, not a noble, not a commander, just one among thousands. A Persian archer, drawn from the satrapy of Susiana. A borderland boy who knew more about oxen than oaths. But that morning, you were part of something vast. The King of Kings, Darius III himself, had called every province to war, from the shores of the Black Sea to the edge of India. Men had marched toward one place, Gaugamela, a stretch of open plain scorched flat by sun and time, chosen so the chariots could ride without obstacle, so the army could stretch its size like a banner. They said Alexander was coming, the Macedonian, the wolf of the West, and you, with your bow, your short blade, and your sandals lined with sheep's wool, were meant to help stop him. You arrived on the third day of assembling. It was already chaos. Horses snorting, chariots being oiled, troops sorted by dialect and command. You were placed with the archer corps under a Mede captain who barked his orders in clipped Old Persian. You understood enough to obey. You had a linen tunic, a stiff leather vest, a curved bow of bone and horn wrapped in hide, and 20 arrows. Some of the men carved prayers into the shafts. You didn't. You didn't think Ahura Mazda had much time to spare for you. All around, you saw things that made you feel smaller than the horizon. Elephants from India, draped in bells and paint, immortals in polished scale armor, Scythian horsemen with faces like stone and whips at their side, rows and rows of Greek mercenaries, silent, perfectly still, their helmets reflecting the dying sun like polished shields of the gods. You ate bread soaked in wine that night and tried not to throw it up. You didn't sleep. You listened to the murmurs, the shifting of armor, the crackle of torches, and somewhere near midnight, the sound of someone crying softly into their hands. At first light, the sky burned pale gold. No birds sang, no wind moved. The stillness made you uneasy, as if even the world feared to interrupt what was coming. Your unit was positioned behind the chariots, ahead of the second line. You could see the king's pavilion, glimmering like a mirage far behind, high on its platform, fluttering with royal banners. From that distance, he was only a silhouette, but you bowed in his direction all the same. They told you we outnumbered them 2-1, maybe more, that the great king had 70,000, 80,000. Some said over 100, that Alexander's force was a fraction of ours. But numbers don't comfort a man who's standing in a line of dirt, watching the sun rise over a killing field. You could already see the Macedonians, tiny figures in tight formation, marching slowly. The rumor passed through the ranks like a fevered whisper. They were coming in an oblique angle, not directly. They want to draw us to the left. Your captain growled. Let them. We'll crush them under chariots. You nodded, but your hand on the bowstring tightened. Then the horses screamed. Not yours. Theirs. The chariots charged first, massive machines fitted with scythed wheels, meant to tear through flesh and bone alike. They thundered down the flat plain, raising a wall of dust in their wake. Behind them, the cavalry surged. Archers took position. You drew your first arrow, your breath stilled. You didn't aim at a man, you aimed at space, at motion. You had been trained for this. Loose when the signal came. Don't hesitate. Don't overthink. The command snapped. You loosed. 100 others did the same. A sound like the sky splitting. Arrows filled the air in waves, some shrieking, others eerily silent. You did not watch to see who fell. You knocked again, pulled again, loosed again. Then, The wall hit, not of men, of noise, steel on steel, hooves pounding, the clash of shields, and worse, the screams. Men, horses, commands, all tangled in a chaos you couldn't see through the dust. Your captain yelled for you to fall back. Too late. The Macedonian flank had moved faster than expected, wheeling around like a tide, breaking a poorly tied boat. Their cavalry swept in from the side. Suddenly, your front became your flank. You turned, drew another arrow, but it was no longer a battlefield. It was survival. The moment is hard to describe because it didn't arrive with a roar. It arrived with a silence. You turned to see the center of the army, the great mass of men around the royal standard, begin to bend. Not shatter, not break, just fold like parchment curling in fire. The Macedonians had broken through. Alexander himself, they said, had led the strike. A wedge of elite infantry, a silver triangle that carved directly toward the king's chariot. No fear, no pause, just purpose. You could see them now, moving as one body, shields locked, pikes forward. The royal guards tried to stop them. Some succeeded, others didn't even scream. You did not know where your captain was. You did not know where your unit had gone. You saw a chariot, riderless, veer in circles before crashing into a wall of your own infantry. You saw a nobleman try to rally a band of horsemen and get crushed beneath a falling standard. You were no longer part of an army. You were a man with a bow, running through blood and confusion. The banner fell. You didn't see it happen, but the roar that swept over the battlefield said everything. The king had fled. Some say he had no choice, others that he panicked. You didn't care. All you knew was that the command structure collapsed with him. Officers scattered, horses bolted, the shield lines disintegrated. Even the elephants turned and stampeded through their own ranks. There was no coordination, no second line, just men running, fighting, or freezing where they stood. You chose to run, not out of cowardice, out of instinct. You dropped your last 3 arrows in the dirt. The bow you kept, but only because it felt like a part of you now. You ran east, following a line of panicked soldiers, trying not to trip on corpses. You passed a boy half your age calling for his father. You passed an immortal, bleeding from the mouth, still holding formation while everyone else ran. And you passed a Macedonian, dead with his eyes open, gripping the haft of the spear that pierced his chest. He looked surprised. When you finally stopped, it was night. You crouched beneath a burned fig tree, miles from the battlefield. Your mouth tasted of sand and ash. Your hands shook. Your legs ached with cold. You were alive. You didn't feel it. The next day, the news spread like smoke. Gaugamela was lost. Darius had escaped, but barely. Alexander had taken the field, the baggage, the royal tent. The empire still stood, but its spine was broken. You wandered for days. No orders, no pay, no command. You returned home by foot. When your mother saw you, she touched your face and said, "Thank Mazda." You didn't answer. You just sat beneath the family tree and looked at the sky. It was the same sky that had hung over Gaugamela, the same stars. But you were not the same man. Now, many years have passed. Alexander is dead. His empire split into pieces like pottery on stone. New kings rise, new satraps swear allegiance. But to you, they all speak the same, in promises that do not reach the fields. You still have your bow. It hangs above your door, polished but unused. Sometimes boys from the village ask what the battle was like. You smile, gently. You tell them it was dust and silence and a kind of fear that never left your bones. You do not tell them of the scream you remember most, not from your enemy, but from your own comrade, crushed under a retreating chariot, begging not to be left behind. You tell them only this: history remembers kings, but I remember the men who bled beside me, and I remember that I was one of them. Then you light the oil lamp and sit quietly and let the silence stretch. You wake before the sun, not from rest, but from habit. Your eyes open to the stone ceiling, the smell of ash and old wool thick in the air. Beside you, another body stirs. A boy, perhaps 13, too thin for his age. Neither of you speaks. Words are rare here. Most are not worth the cost. You sit up, your joints complain. You press your hand to your ribs, where the bone never fully healed. They say it was kicked in during your first year in chains. You don't remember the exact moment, just the pain, just the heat, just the voice that said, "He'll live. Let him." That was how mercy sounded. You were not born into this. Once, long ago, you sat on soft cushions beneath date palms, listening to the sound of water flow through carved channels. You wore linen robes scented with saffron. You read tablets aloud to your father, practiced calligraphy with a stylus carved of rosewood. You knew poetry. You knew the names of stars. But that life is another man's story now. You are assigned to the dye vats. The task is simple, but endless. Haul the clay jars from the storage pit. Pour the thick liquid. Stir with a split reed staff until your arms tremble. You are told not to spill, not because the overseer minds the waste, but because the smell of spilt indigo lingers for days, clinging to cloth, skin, hair, like blood that never dries. At first, your hands blistered, the chemicals carved thin cuts into your fingers, your palms. Now the skin is hardened, cracked like dry earth, permanently stained with hues that no water can erase. You dream in color now, not of gold or marble, but of purple that clings to your flesh like shame. They give you 2 breaks, one for water, one for silence. You take both, and when you return, you bow, not in reverence, but in calculation. Submission is a language. You learned it quickly. The wrong glance, the wrong step, the wrong pause before kneeling can mean a week without food or a night in the stone pen, where the rats outnumber the straw. You no longer remember the name of the man who first taught you this, but you remember his scream when he forgot. You had a sister once. She was barely 13 when the raiders came. The same night you were taken, your village set ablaze, not for rebellion, not for politics, but for what lay along the trade route: timber, cattle, and people. They separated you at the riverbank. You saw her pulled by the wrist, her feet slipping in the mud. She did not cry, not then, only looked at you, wide-eyed, mouth trembling, as if waiting for you to explain. But there was no explanation. Only chains. You never saw her again. Years passed. You searched faces in the marketplace, behind veils, beneath slave carts. Once, you swore you saw her, a woman with your mother's chin, a familiar tilt in her step. But when you called out, she turned, and the face was wrong, empty. You still wake some nights with her name on your tongue, but you do not speak it aloud. Here, names have power, and hers is the only one that still hurts. You were once a scholar's son, and while your body bends, your mind does not. In the still moments, those rare, quiet hours between labor and darkness, you recite, not aloud, just in your head, lines from the Avesta, verses from old poems, the stars you once charted above the southern sky. You trace constellations in your thoughts while others sleep. You replay your mother's voice, your father's laughter, the way sunlight once struck the temple wall at dawn. You tell stories to yourself, not because you believe in hope, but because you believe in memory. Some say slaves forget who they were, but you remember. You remember too much, and that, perhaps, is the one wound they could never close. One winter, a child is assigned to your team, thin-legged, wild-eyed, perhaps 7 at most. His name is not spoken, just a number barked by the overseer. But you see how he clutches a charm around his neck, a carved pebble, faint lines scratched into it. You recognize them. It's not just a stone, it's a letter, an old dialect, one you haven't seen in years. That night, when no one is watching, you whisper to the boy, asking what it means. He stares at you, uncertain, then quietly says, "My mother said it means truth." You nod. You do not smile, but something moves inside your chest for the first time in years. You begin to teach him, not openly, not fully, but enough. A word a day, a shape in the dust, a whispered chant under your breath while stirring the dye. Stirring the dye. He learns, fast, like you did, once. And in him, you see not your past, but something like a future. The boy becomes your shadow. When others rest, he listens. When the guards are distracted, he scribbles words into the dirt. Quick lines, broken sentences, scattered meaning. But he learns, and each word is like a brick in a wall you thought had long since collapsed. Years pass this way. He grows taller, stronger, quieter, but never silent. Others begin to notice. Not the guards, the others like you, the broken, the beaten, the half erased. They begin watching him too, asking him questions, listening when he speaks, and you watch them change, not by much, not by sword, but in small ways. One man begins reciting an old prayer again. A woman hums a tune forbidden in the dye pits. A few light candles on solstice night, pressed deep into the corners of the stone walls. You have given them no rebellion, only memory. But sometimes that is enough. You grow older. Your hands no longer hold the reed staff. Your knees ache too deeply to carry the jars. They reassign you to the courtyard, sweeping dust that never leaves. The boy, now a man, brings you water, stays beside you as the sun sets. One evening, he says, "When you are gone, I will still remember." You nod and close your eyes. You do not fear death. You feared forgetting, but you are not forgotten. And in a quiet corner of the world, in a place where no kings rule and no scribes write, a young man lights a fire each morning with a word that once meant truth, whispered into ash, carried by breath. You are gone, but not lost, because even in slavery, you endured.